Well, a top retired military leader is now calling on President Obama to come clean on the terror attack that killed 4 Americans at our consulate in Benghazi, Libya. Retired Admiral James Lyons served in the Navy for 36 years, retiring a little more than 20 years ago after serving as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, the largest single military command in the world. He has just written a strong editorial saying the American people deserve answers to the lingering questions about what happened in Benghazi. Joining me now, retired Navy Admiral James Lyons. Admiral, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for being here on the program.
Nice to be here, Megan.
You seem very upset about this situation. Explain why.
Well, this attack should not have come as a surprise to anybody. We know that the Brits and the Red Cross pulled out of Benghazi in the middle of the summer because of the deteriorating security situation. We have the 16 August message from the consulate back to the Department of State stating they could not defend that consulate against a coordinated attack. They identified 10 well-armed militias, Al-Qaeda affiliated, that were running wild, and they had no fear of the government because the government had lost all control of eastern Libya. Plus, on the day of the attack, the Blue Mountain security manager, who actually hired the 17th February Martyrs Brigade to protect the consulate, sensed there was something wrong. He put out an alert on both his radio and cell phones. In fact, there was been reported that there was a split between him and the Martyrs Brigade. Nonetheless, an alert went out. He got on a plane and left Benghazi. And then after that, we have a group that we know 3 hours before the attack, the Ansar al-Sharia militia, Al-Qaeda affiliated, was setting up roadblocks and checkpoints around the consulate.
Yeah. Their link to this has now been established through a number of channels. But I know you also have an issue with how we responded, and our own Jennifer Griffin has reported that 3 calls for help by those who were under attack were ignored or rejected by the CIA, it looks like, and yet the CIA has denied that. You say in your editorial, having been in a number of similar situations, I know you have to have courage to do what's right and take immediate action. What do you mean by that?
Well, in this particular case, we had a 130-man Marine Recon Force team sitting at Sigonella, fully armed, well led by a sergeant major and a lieutenant colonel who could have been there in Benghazi in a matter of hours, a few hours, 2 hours plus. We also had F-16 jets, which were not that far away, which could have been used to overfly the consulate in full afterburner, which would have caused those attackers to scatter without even firing anything.
But you know, Defense Secretary Panetta says it's the fog of war. You don't send troops until you know what's going on the ground.
Well, I find it inconceivable they didn't know what was going on the ground with the overhead drone video and the constant communications from the defenders.
I want to ask you about some breaking news on this situation, and that is this. President Obama maintained at the second presidential debate that he had always called this terrorism, that he knew from day one it was terrorism. And then late last night, CBS News, which had an interview, 60 Minutes, with the president on September 12th after this, releases quietly on its website a critical outtake from their interview with President Obama, where they specifically asked him whether this was terrorism. And I want you to listen to what the president said. Listen.
Mr. President, this morning you went out of your way to avoid the use of the word terrorism in connection with the Libya attack.
Right.
Do you believe that this was a terrorist attack?
Well, it's too early to know exactly how this came about, what group was involved, but obviously it was an attack on Americans, and we are going to be working with the Libyan government to make sure that we bring these folks to justice one way or the other.
So he says it's too early to know. but he maintained at the second debate that he's been referring to it as terror all along. And, you know, CBS News decides 60 Minutes edits this out of the piece and then doesn't post it until 48 hours before the election. Your thoughts, Admiral?
Total cover-up. Mainstream media has been totally covering up this story. It's really borders on a criminal act here.
Do you think this story lives on if President Obama wins a second term?
I think this story will live on because of the culpability of the administration when you just don't let Americans die. One of your first responsibilities is to ensure the safety of your personnel, and that remains paramount. That did not occur in this situation.
Admiral Lyons, thank you so much for being here.
Nice to be with you, Megan.
We appreciate it, sir. Don't go away. Coming up, Dick Morris on his projections for what's going to happen in this race.